$1 million if you can heal these legs." It was a fair trade, right? Maya Williams instinctively backed away, startled, her eyes widening as she realized she'd bumped into a man in a wheelchair on her way to the restroom. She offered a quick, reflexive bow of her head anyway. "I am so sorry, sir." Jack Remington looked up from his wine glass. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with Italian loafers perched strangely on his wheelchair's brace, he was unmistakable. Salt and pepper hair, a firm jawline, eyes like smoked glass. It was Jack Remington, the once revered tech titan. His smile slowly curled like a drawn knife. "Didn't even touch me, did you?" he said loudly with a mocking tone. Maya kept her composure. "I apologize nonetheless." A derisive chuckle escaped him. Jack reached into his blazer pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, crumpled it, and tossed it to the floor near Maya's feet. "Here's the deal," he said, his voice deliberately louder and challenging. "Get down there." Jack's gaze swept over her legs and then returned to her face. "Give my legs a little rub, and that $10 is yours. Call it a bonus for your acting." His shrill laughter echoed through the room, drawing judgmental stares. A man frowned, a woman clutched her wine glass. Maya stood motionless. She looked down at the crumpled bill on the marble floor, then back up, meeting Jack's gaze directly. "I'm not here to perform." Her voice was soft but strong, without a hint of a tremble. Jack laughed harder, like an old lion toying with its prey. "Oh, come on. It's just a joke. Lighten up. Your people used to have a sense of humor." But his smile suddenly froze. Maya wasn't glaring. She wasn't ashamed. She just stood there, poised and calm, her eyes looking straight past Jack Remington's arrogant shell and inconvenient wheelchair. She didn't see the man on the magazine cover, nor a distorted image of disability. She saw a broken soul. In that quiet moment, Maya spoke, her voice warm and full of understanding. "Do you really laugh like that? Or are you just trying to drown out the part of you that still wants to cry?" The room seemed to pause. The clinking of cutlery, the murmur of conversations. It all went silent. Jack's eyes narrowed, his smile hardening like cement. He tried to laugh again, but this time it was a smaller, weaker, forced sound. "All right, I'll up the ante," he muttered, as if trying to regain control. $1 million if you can fix these broken legs. No massages, no prayers. Just make me walk, and the money is yours." Maya blinked. Those words, along with the aching look in his eyes, made all the pieces click into place. She recognized him. Jack Remington, once a symbol of success, now a shadow of his former self after a horse-riding accident and a messy divorce. Still sharp, still cruel, but inside, he was shattered. She looked deep into the eyes behind his self-satisfied facade. The pain, heavy and buried deep, was impossible to hide. It wasn't physical pain, but the emptiness of a man who had lost everything. "I hope you enjoy your meal," Maya said, her voice filled with compassion but no pity. She stepped over the $10 bill, a decisive and dignified gesture. She walked away, leaving a strangely silent Jack Remington behind. 2 days later, Maya stood before the heavy iron gate of the Remington estate. She had almost turned down this temporary caregiver job until they mentioned the name. Standing beneath the weeping willows, she breathed slowly. She didn't know what awaited her inside. The gate clicked and swung open. The house was quiet, magnificent, filled with marble mahogany and long shadows. Maya moved softly through the main hall toward the sunroom. Jack Remington was there by the window, looking out at the shimmering pond in the morning light. A half-finished glass of wine still on the table. "You," he said, his voice surprised and perhaps annoyed. "I didn't expect to see you again either," Maya replied, her voice calm. Jack sneered. "Fate has a sick sense of humor." Maya offered a polite smile, walked to a low cabinet, and set down her purse. "Here to scrub my soul clean?" he muttered. "I'm here to help in whatever way I can," Maya said softly. Jack pointed at his legs, mentioning the $1 million again. "I'm serious. It's tax-free. Fix this and you'll be set for life." Maya paused, looking at him carefully. "Do you think I'm joking?" "I think you're in pain," Maya said, her gaze without a hint of mockery. Only a stillness and a strength that made Jack both curious and uncomfortable. "If you could walk again, what would you do?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper. Jack scoffed. "Dance naked on my lawyer's table, fire half the board, buy back my own company and burn it down." "Wouldn't you live differently?" Maya asked again. "Wouldn't you live better?" Jack's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at her, imagining a sarcastic smile, a fake pity, but all he saw was sincerity. She adjusted the blanket on his lap, a natural, unhurried gesture. Jack looked down at her hands. They were strong, unpampered, and unafraid of burdens, whether physical or spiritual. "At the restaurant, you laughed at me," Maya said. "You made me feel small in front of strangers." Jack flinched slightly. "But what I remember more than your laugh," she continued, "was your eyes. Inside you weren't laughing at all." Jack turned his face away, his jaw clenched. She stepped back, giving him space. "I'm not here to judge, just to help." "I don't need your pity," he snapped. "It's not pity," Maya replied. "It's something you may have forgotten. Dignity." Jack looked at her for a long time. Something in him shifted, tiny but noticeable. The challenge was still there, but the cruelty had softened. "All right," he mumbled. "Let's see what you can do." Maya nodded and walked toward the kitchen. Behind her, Jack sat in strange silence, his eyes fixed on a distant point. That morning, he didn't laugh anymore. Not once. Maya moved through the expansive estate with practiced ease. The kitchen, with its granite countertops and gleaming chrome, sparkled in the natural light. She moved with precision, heating water for tea, arranging a plate of toast and soft-boiled eggs. Every gesture was respectful and careful, as if she were performing a ritual. It was how she treated every client, no matter how cruel or kind. In the warm kitchen, Maya hummed a wordless tune soft as a breath. It was a sound from the depths of memory. Not a familiar song, but one that made Jack's chest tighten. He hated the feeling of weakness and regret. He sat motionless in his wheelchair, his eyes fixed out the window where a flock of geese waddled lazily and serenely by the pond. His legs, stiff and cold, felt like they belonged to a stranger. For months he had stopped trying to move them, ever since the last physical therapist gave up. They were a painful reminder of a fall from which he could not rise, a failure that could not be undone. "Tea, 2 sugars, no lemon." Her voice was gentle, breaking the silence. Jack nodded without looking at her, not saying a word. Her silence, her subtlety made him uncomfortable. She placed the tea tray on the table and turned to leave. But at the door she paused. "Do you want to eat here or in the dining room?" "Here is fine." Jack's voice was low, distant. Maya nodded and stepped out, leaving Jack alone with the steaming cup of tea. The steam curled thin as smoke from a long-extinguished fire. Jack reached out, trying to grab the cup. His fingers trembled. He didn't truly need the tea. He needed the feeling of control. His hand made the cup wobble, a little hot tea spilling onto the saucer. A low curse escaped his lips. Almost instantly, Maya reappeared. "Let me help," she said, her voice still calm. "No!" Jack snapped, full of anger and helplessness. "I can do it myself." Maya didn't move. She just stood there, silent and patient. Her presence wasn't pity, but a powerful stillness. Jack managed to get a firm grip on the cup, bringing it to his lips and drinking it down. The heat burned his tongue, but he didn't grimace. It was a small, welcome, and genuine pain. Finally, he set the cup down and looked directly at Maya. "What is so special about you?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "Sir," she raised an eyebrow. "You move through this place as if it belongs to you, but without arrogance. You are as steady as if nothing could ever touch you." "I've been touched enough," she replied simply and truthfully. Jack was silent. He'd had dozens of nurses and assistants. They all treated him like a piece of valuable porcelain or a poison to be avoided. But she didn't. "You're not afraid of me." "I'm not here to be afraid," Maya responded, her eyes not wavering. "I'm here to see the person behind the noise." Jack turned his face away, his jaw clenched. "There's not much left behind the noise." "I don't believe that." Her voice was firm. Jack scoffed, full of skepticism. "You think you can fix what the best doctors couldn't." "I think healing doesn't always start with a doctor." He turned back, looking at her with a challenge in his eyes. "So you think you can heal me?" "I think I can help you try," she said, a gentle smile on her lips. Jack's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like hope. That's dangerous." "Hope isn't dangerous," Maya replied, her calmness compelling Jack to listen. "It's just forgotten." He leaned back in his chair, watching her. "And what gives you the right to walk in here with all that hope?" Because I've lived without it, and I know what that silence feels like. Jack looked down at his unresponsive legs. Have you ever lost something that defines who you are? Yes, she said. Like what? He asked, a flicker of curiosity in his voice. Maya hesitated as if considering her words. My son Caleb, 9 years old. He had leukemia. We couldn't afford the experimental therapy. We had insurance, but it wouldn't cover it. We waited too long. Jack's mouth opened, the words he was about to say catching in his throat. I quit being a nurse after that, she continued, her voice lower now, but not trembling. I couldn't face another hospital bed, another chart, or another helpless mother. The silence between them became heavy. Maya's pain, raw and real, filled the room. I'm sorry, Jack said. For the first time, the words sounded sincere, without any irony. I'm not telling you for pity, Maya replied, reaffirming her dignity. Only so you know that when I say I understand pain, I mean it. Jack looked at her for a long time, then gave a slight nod, a sign of acceptance. All right, he said, his voice much softer. Let's say I buy into your miracle cure. What would you do? Lay on hands, pray, burn herbs? Maya shook her head gently. Not exactly. Not yet. Then what? Talk walk. If you can't use your legs, we'll use your mind. Jack looked at her with suspicion. So, therapy. Presence, she corrected. Therapy is too clinical. This is about listening, about facing what's underneath. He grumbled, but this time it wasn't out of anger, but confusion. Maybe for the first time in years he had met someone who truly wanted to listen. Maya looked at Jack, her gaze calm and full of understanding. I've faced everything, but not like this. Jack sighed, pushing his wheelchair back slightly. Fine, but no kumbaya nonsense. If I feel like I'm wasting my time, I'm stopping. Of course, Maya said, her voice unshakable. That afternoon, their first session began. Maya asked Jack to describe his fall. Not the event, but the internal feeling, the panic, the chilling silence, then the ultimate painful realization. At first, Jack spoke reluctantly, his words disjointed and defensive. But then his voice flowed more freely. He talked about the horse's terrified shriek, the crisp sound of breaking bones, the feeling of his body going numb before the pain hit like a raging fire. He talked about the ceiling of the ambulance, about the cold words of doctors who no longer saw him as a powerful man. He didn't cry, but by the time his story was over, his voice was broken, trembling with vulnerability. Maya listened, not interrupting, not judging. She was simply there, absorbing all those painful words. That evening, alone in the vast mansion, Jack wheeled himself into the library, a place he hadn't entered in over a year. A thin layer of dust covered the books, the fireplace was cold. He browsed the titles, his eyes empty. Then he stopped at a book, The Art of Letting Go. He pulled it out. Inside, there was a faded photo of him and his ex-wife at a party. They were smiling, looking invincible, as if nothing could ever defeat them. Old pain surged back. Jack threw it back on the shelf, filled with anger. The next morning, Maya arrived early. In her hands was a different kind of breakfast, grits, scrambled eggs, and toast with peach jam. I thought you might like a Southern-style morning, she said. Jack frowned but tried the food. It was warm, simple, not luxurious, but it brought a sense of familiarity, as if cooked by someone who genuinely cared about him. They spoke less, but sat together longer. The silence was no longer an awkward void, but a subtle connection. Later, Jack asked, Why do you do this job? These people why me? Maya tilted her head, looking him straight in the eyes, her gaze gentle. Because someone has to remind the world that pain doesn't make us less human. Jack slowly nodded, a silent acceptance. And you think I'm still human? Maya smiled softly. I think you're still becoming human. For the first time in years, Jack felt something stir in his chest. Not anger, not pride, not even exactly hope. It was a breath. A long, slow, very human breath. And he didn't want to waste it. 3 days had passed since Maya Williams walked through the gates of the Remington estate. 3 days of quiet mornings, reserved conversations, and a stillness that was no longer an emptiness, but more like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Jack, once hailed as an industry titan, now spent his mornings waiting for the soft sound of Maya's footsteps on the marble floor. He told himself it was about habit, about the structure she brought. But deep down, he knew it was something else, something he wasn't ready to name. That morning, Maya walked into the sunroom carrying a small wooden box. Jack raised an eyebrow, his curiosity growing. "What's in the mystery chest?" "Memories," she said simply. She placed the box on the coffee table between them and opened it. Inside were small, humble objects, an old brass bell, a smooth river stone, and a photo of a boy around 8 or 9 years old grinning with a missing front tooth. "That's Caleb," she said softly, pointing to the picture. Jack leaned in, his eyes lingering on the boy's innocent smile. "He looks like you." "He had his father's laugh," she replied. "But his eyes were mine." Jack said nothing. Instead, he picked up the stone. It was cool and smooth, clearly held many times. "I used to give this to Caleb when he was anxious," Maya explained. "He said it helped him feel grounded. He'd rub the stone between his fingers and say, 'The ground is still under me, Mom, so I won't fly away.'" Jack let out a long, heavy breath. He was a smart kid. Yes, he was. They sat in silence. "You brought this for me?" Jack asked, his voice filled with surprise. Maya nodded. "I think it's time to start." "Start what?" "Healing." Jack gave a small, skeptical laugh. "With a rock?" "With what's real," she corrected. "And what's real is that you wear your pain like a badge, but you don't let yourself feel it. Not all of it." "I've felt pain," Jack said, his voice tense. "Every day since that horse threw me like a rag doll." "I believe you, but I'm talking about the pain before that. The kind you buried so deep you don't even name it anymore." Jack leaned back in his chair, his jaw clenched. "What do you know about my pain?" "Nothing," she said gently, as if in an admission. "That's why I'm asking." He looked away, his fingers gripping the armrests. Maya didn't press him. She got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the tranquil pond. "There's something about still water," she said. "It reflects everything, even what we try to hide." Jack didn't speak. That afternoon they went out to the backyard where the sun was warm and the breeze carried the scent of gardenias. Maya spread a blanket on the lawn. "We're not meditating, are we?" Jack grumbled, his voice still full of sarcasm. "No," she said. "We're stretching." He stared at her. "You do know I can't move my legs, right?" "I know," Maya replied. "But there's still value in reminding the body that it exists." Maya gently guided him, every gesture and every word filled with patience and understanding. The journey of healing through the smallest and most genuine things had truly begun. Maya took Jack's ankle, gently lifting one of his legs and carefully massaging each joint. Jack winced, not in pain, but from a deeply ingrained habit of complaining. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "I'm fine," he answered quickly, a defensive reflex. "Just not used to being touched. Touch isn't just contact." Maya said, her eyes still focused on her work. "It's connection." Jack turned his face away. For 20 minutes she worked in silence. Her hands moved with the precision of a skilled nurse, but also with the tenderness of a mother. She only spoke when necessary, adjusting, guiding, encouraging. Then something remarkable happened. As she lifted his right leg, her palm resting just above his knee, Jack took a sharp breath. "What was that?" he asked, his eyes wide with astonishment. "I didn't feel anything," Maya said, watching him carefully without showing any surprise. "I did," Jack whispered, his voice disbelieving. "A tingling sensation, not strong, just like a little spark, right here." He pointed to his calf. Maya just nodded slowly. "That's good. Do you think it was real?" Jack asked, his eyes full of doubt, but also a fragile hope. "Only you can answer that," she replied. Jack sat in silence for a long time, looking at his legs, which had been dead for the last 6 months. "No one has touched these legs in 6 months. Not even me. They were dead. Maybe they were never dead," Maya said softly. "Just waiting." The next morning, Jack was awake when Maya arrived. He had dressed himself and was sitting at the breakfast nook sipping coffee. Maya smiled. "Well, this is new. I wanted to beat you at something for once." He shrugged, but a very human effort shone in his eyes. He had made slightly runny scrambled eggs and buttered toast himself. The effort was visible in every detail. "You cook too," she teased. "I used to," he said, his voice softer, "before everything became served and cold." They sat together, the conversation becoming lighter. Jack even laughed genuinely when Maya mentioned a goose that chased her car as she drove in. After breakfast, they continued the stretching. This time, Jack asked for music. Anything but jazz, he grumbled. Maya chose a deep, mellow, and steady instrumental piece. As she worked on his legs, he began to talk about the early days of his company, the risks, the passion, the nights he slept under his desk. She listened with fascination, not just to the content, but to the way he spoke, as if he were remembering the person he used to be. "Your voice changes when you talk about building," she said. "It softens, as if you're talking about someone you love." Jack looked at her. "I did love it. The work, the vision." "What happened?" He was silent, then answered slowly. "Success changes everything. Suddenly, it was all about stock prices, the board of directors' public image. I stopped building, I started managing, and I hated managing." Maya nodded. "You lost yourself in the noise." He looked her straight in the eye. "Maybe, or maybe I never truly knew who I was." That night alone, Jack wheeled himself into the music room, which had been covered in dust since the accident. He opened the piano lid and ran his hand over the keys. He pressed one key. The sound was clear and sharp. Then he pressed a second, a third. Not a song yet, but a sound of beginning. Maya, walking in the hallway, heard it. She stopped one hand on the stair railing and smiled. The following day, Jack asked her to teach him to meditate. "I thought you hated kumbaya," she teased. "I changed my mind." He said, a surprising shift. They sat together breathing. Maya guided him through the process. Awareness, breath, presence. When it was over, Jack didn't open his eyes right away. "I feel lighter," he said. "Because you let go," she replied. He nodded slowly. "I want to keep going." "We will." That afternoon, as Maya packed up to leave, Jack called her back. "Maya," she turned around. "That thing you said about not floating away." He held up the stone from her memory box. "Can I borrow this for a while?" She smiled. "It's yours now." Jack nodded gently, clutching the stone in his palm. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a broken man. He felt like a man who was starting over. The days passed, becoming longer, warmer, brighter. A quiet transformation was taking place at the Remington estate, not just in the air or the rooms, but in the man who had once haunted them like a ghost in his own kingdom. Jack Remington had begun to live in his space, not just exist. The music room was no longer silent. The breakfast nook was now a place for two. The sunroom, once his private prison, had become their shared sanctuary. But the silence hadn't completely vanished. It still lingered in unspoken memories, in questions Jack still avoided, and in the way he would sometimes stare into the distance for a long time. Jack's fingers subconsciously traced the smooth river stone Maya had given him. On Saturday, since Maya had started, Jack woke before dawn. He sat by the window, watching the gray light filter into the garden like water soaking into parched earth. His legs, still immobile, now felt warmer, more present. He tried to press his hands into them, and felt a real pressure. He couldn't explain it, but it was real. That morning, he didn't call for Maya. Instead, he tried to move his foot. Just a small twitch, not dramatic, not cinematic. But as he stared at his toes, pouring all his will into making them move, he saw it. A wiggle, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But it was real. His breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. Yes, it had moved. Jack sat back stunned. For a few minutes he didn't speak, didn't think, didn't even smile. The moment was too big for words. He had considered his body dead, and now it was whispering a signal of life. When Maya arrived, Jack was in the hallway, hands on the wheels of his chair, back straight. "You look different," she said, tilting her head. "I can move," he said, his voice still full of wonder. "Your legs, my toes." She said nothing, just smiled and nodded as if this was something she had already known. "I almost didn't believe it," Jack added. "I thought maybe it was a nerve spasm, but it was me. I made them move." Maya gently set her bag down. Then we moved forward. That morning they didn't stretch. Instead, Maya asked him to sit in the music room. She placed a basin of warm water near his feet. "What is this?" he asked, full of skepticism. "A reminder that healing isn't always dramatic," she said, her voice full of understanding. "It's small, it's quiet. Sometimes it's simply washing away the shame." Jack hesitated. You want me to put my feet in, and I'll wash them. He looked at her stunned. That's not necessary. It's not about necessity, she said, her eyes not wavering. It's about permission. He didn't know why, but his throat tightened. He turned away, embarrassed. I can't let you do that. Because of pride. He was silent. Or because you think the scars make you less than you are. Still silent. Jack, I'm not here to fix you like a broken chair. She continued, her voice now softer. I'm here to remind you that you are worthy of the effort. After a moment, Jack slowly lifted a leg, letting her gently guide his foot into the basin. The water was warm, the sensation strange. As she began to wash them gently with a soft cloth, something in him broke. Not his ego, but the pain, the helplessness that had been repressed for so long. His eyes stung, but he didn't wipe them away. Afterward, Maya dried his feet and put on thick socks for him. One day, she said, you will walk into this room yourself. I want to believe you, he whispered, his voice full of a vulnerability he had never allowed himself to show. Then start by believing in yourself. That afternoon, Jack made a phone call, the first in years. The phone rang 4 times before a tired, deep voice answered. Hello, Cliff. It's me, Jack said. A long silence followed. Then, Jack. Yeah, more silence. Then Cliff let out a slow sigh as if a weight had been lifted. You're alive. So far so good, Jack said with a strained, uneasy laugh. Why are you calling? Cliff asked, his voice still full of suspicion. Jack swallowed hard. I don't know. I guess I thought I could say I'm sorry. Cliff was quiet. For what? He finally asked. For the way things ended, for the board vote, for pushing you out when you didn't deserve it. Cliff gave a bitter laugh. It took 4 years in a wheelchair for you to grow a conscience. I deserve that, Jack said, his voice lowering. A long silence. Then Cliff's voice softened. You really think so? Yeah, another beat. Well, I'll be damned. They spoke for another 10 minutes. When the call ended, Jack sat in stunned silence. He hadn't realized how heavy the regret had been until he put it down. The following days passed with a new rhythm. Maya brought in light resistance bands. Jack pushed against them, his hands shaking, his legs barely feeling the force. But they moved. One afternoon, Maya walked in with a small bag. What's that? Jack asked. Your old shirt. He raised an eyebrow. You went through my closet. I asked the housekeeper. She said you used to wear this when you were building your first lab. She pulled out a faded navy t-shirt with a cracked tech logo on the front. Jack stared at it. I haven't seen this in a decade. Put it on, he hesitated. It probably smells like old dreams. Exactly. He slowly changed with great effort and looked at himself in the mirror. For the first time in months, maybe years, he saw a man, not a patient. That evening they sat in the garden. Maya sipped her tea next to a man who was beginning to come back to life. Continuing from the previous section, the background music becomes more profound and emotional, suggesting change. Jack read a book Maya suggested, The Long Way Back, a memoir by a veteran who rebuilt his life after paralysis. You're not the only one, she reminded him. Pain makes us feel alone. But we're not, Jack nodded. Thank you. For what? For looking past the headlines, for not treating me like a composite of my mistakes. You're welcome, she said softly, a phrase that held all the understanding and sincerity in the world. As the sun set, painting the garden gold, Jack asked a surprising question. Do you think Caleb would have liked me? Maya looked at him, taken aback. I think, she said carefully, he would have seen the part of you that's coming back to life. The answer touched a deep place in Jack. That night, he stood up. Not completely, not for long, but with Maya's help, he got out of his wheelchair. His legs trembled. His hands shook, sweat beaded on his forehead. But he stood. The silence around him broke not with noise, but with presence. He wasn't a miracle, but he was moving, coming back to life. The next morning, Jack Remington woke before the birds chirped. For a man who had once lived by alarms, meetings, and tight deadlines, this new rhythm was strangely quiet. But today, something was buzzing under his skin, a warmth, a drive not of panic, but of anticipation. He slowly sat up in bed, swung his legs over the side, and reached for the cane Maya had brought 3 days earlier. It had stood in the corner as a challenge, a symbol of hope. Today he took it, his fingers trembling around the carved wooden handle, and pressed it against the floor. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, with a quiet groan and gritted teeth, he pushed forward. His legs, weak and stubborn, responded hesitantly. He pushed up inch by inch until he was standing. His breath came in gasps. His heart pounded as if he'd just run a mile. But he was standing. He didn't call for Maya. He didn't reach for his intercom. He took one step, then another. Each step was fire. Each step was freedom. When Maya walked into the house at exactly 7:30, Jack was halfway down the hallway, leaning heavily on the cane, but standing straight-dressed and sweating profusely. She stopped dead in her tracks at the sight. "You're walking," she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and caution. "Barely," Jack panted, more like falling forward and catching myself. She slowly moved toward him, her hands ready to catch him if he slipped. "Jack, this is incredible," she said, her eyes shining. He let out a breathless laugh. "I didn't want to wait. I needed to know it wasn't a dream." Maya walked beside him, gently placing a hand on his arm for balance. "I'll be your shadow today," she said, "until you're steady." "I'm not going to argue," Jack said, his voice still rough. That morning they walked from room to room. It was slow, painful, but triumphant. Each doorway passed was a victory. Each new step was a battle against fear and doubt. Jack swore under his breath frequently, but didn't stop. They rested. They drank water. Maya made a protein smoothie with low sugar, lots of banana and almond butter. Jack made a face, but drank the whole thing. At one point, Jack asked, "What if I fall?" "You let me catch you," she said, "and we try again." Closer to noon, Jack sat by the fireplace, a towel draped around his neck, his face flushed from the effort. He watched the flames dance for a long time. "Have you ever thought about revenge?" he asked suddenly. Maya looked up from where she was tidying a rug. "I have," she said, "when I was younger, when I felt like the world owed me something." He nodded slowly. "I still think about it. Not petty revenge, but big revenge. The kind where you take down a whole boardroom." She came and sat opposite him. "Revenge is about power," she said, her voice warm. "It fills the void when dignity is stolen." Jack's jaw clenched. "They made me feel worthless." "So take your worth back by rising up," she said. "Not by pulling others down." He looked at her, his eyes full of surprise. "You always sound like a walking proverb." She smiled. "Only when necessary." Jack turned back to the fire. "When I was in the hospital, they sent a representative from the board. Not the CEO, not even my assistant, just a rep. Cold eyes. Smelled like air freshener and fear. She said, 'Jack, the board needs to move on. You've given all you can. It's time to rest.' Rest as if I was a dying dog." Maya listened in silence. "I signed the papers," Jack continued. "What choice did I have? I couldn't walk, couldn't speak clearly. They said the next surgery might make things worse. Told me I should focus on healing, so I gave it all up." Maya leaned toward him. "But you're not done." "No," he said softly. "I'm just getting started." That afternoon, Maya guided him through seated resistance exercises with bands, light weights, and balance work. She didn't push him to his physical limit, but she kept his spirit engaged, one step at a time. Jack, straining to lift a small dumbbell, looked at Maya. "You think this is really happening?" "I think your body is catching up with your soul," she said. He gave a small laugh. "Do you ever run out of metaphors?" "Never," she smiled. That evening, Jack asked to eat on the back patio. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the estate grounds. The cicadas kept a steady rhythm, a summer song. Maya prepared grilled rosemary chicken, brown rice, and roasted vegetables. She brought out a pitcher of iced mint tea and sat opposite him. Jack chewed slowly, thoughtfully. "This is good," he admitted. "My grandmother's recipe," she said. "She used to make it for everyone on Sundays. Big porch, long table chairs that never matched." Jack offered a faint smile. "Sounds like a memory you always carry with you." "I do," she said. They ate in silence. Then Jack asked, "Have you ever thought about going back to full-time nursing?" "Sometimes," she hesitated. "But the system is broken. Too many charts, not enough care. I do better working one-on-one, person to person." Jack nodded slowly. "That's how I built my first team. No titles, just trust." As evening fell, the conversation quieted. The air grew cool. Jack leaned back in his chair, his legs aching but his heart full. "Tomorrow," he said softly. "I want to walk outside." Maya looked at him surprised. "Are you sure? I don't want to hide in this mausoleum anymore." "Then I'll be ready." That night, Jack returned to the music room. This time, he sat at the piano, stretched his fingers, and played. Not Bach or Beethoven, but simple chords, hesitant but real. The music drifted through the hallway, past portraits of ancestors, through rooms that hadn't seen life in years. Maya, upstairs folding blankets, stopped. She closed her eyes and listened, and she smiled. The fire beneath the surface had found its song. Jack Remington was no longer broken. He was burning, becoming rising. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees like liquid gold spilling onto the gravel paths of the Remington estate. Birds flitted from branch to branch, chirping with a joyful sound as if the world were preparing to witness something sacred. In the stillness of the dawn, Maya Williams stood on the threshold of the back patio waiting for Jack Remington. He appeared slowly, cane in hand, his steps cautious but determined. A crisp button-down shirt, sharply pressed chinos. Sweat already beaded on his temples, though he hadn't gone more than 10 steps. Maya smiled. "Ready?" Jack looked at the path that curved gently toward the woods, past the rose garden, through the orchard, down to the reflecting pond. He hadn't been there in years. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said. They began. Jack's feet crunched on the gravel, the cane tapping out a steady rhythm. Maya walked beside him, not touching, just present his silent anchor. Each step was a rebellion against doubt. Each breath was a defiance of the voices that had declared him finished. The pain was still there, like a shadow under the sun, but it no longer ruled him. They passed the rose garden first. The bushes had bloomed again, crimson blush pink and pristine white. Jack stopped, taking a deep breath. "My wife planted them," he whispered. "She said they made her feel strong. She liked that they were beautiful and dangerous at the same time." Maya nodded. "A perfect metaphor. She left long before the accident," Jack continued. "But I had let her go even before that." They moved on. In the orchard, Jack leaned against a gnarled apple tree. "I used to bring interns out here, tell them that success grows in rows, hard work, sunshine, patience. Do you still believe that?" "I believe that growth hurts, but yes, it's still real." As they neared the pond, Maya slowed her pace. "Do you want to rest?" Jack shook his head. "I didn't come all this way to stop." At the pond's edge, he looked at his reflection in the water, older, scarred, but standing. A dragonfly zipped across the surface. The air was still. Jack sat on a stone bench, breathing heavily, but his eyes held something Maya had never seen. Peace mixed with a quiet sense of pride. "You've changed," she said. "I've remembered," he replied. "The feeling of fighting for something?" Jack whispered, his gaze fixed on the still pond. They sat in silence. Then Jack spoke, his voice gentler than before. "I want to go back." "Go back where?" "To the company. Not as CEO. I don't need the title, but I want to build again. Maybe a foundation." Maya smiled. "What would it focus on?" "Second chances, healing dignity." Maya looked at him with silent admiration. "You're not the man I met in the restaurant anymore." Jack gave a small laugh. "I'm not sure I ever really was. Just a shadow that power created." He slowly rose, gripped his cane tightly, and started back toward the house. The return trip was slower, but not because of fatigue. He was thinking, each step loaded with a new intention. When they reached the patio, the estate staff were gathered. The housekeeper, the gardener, 2 chefs. They didn't speak. They just applauded silently as Jack walked past. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't forced. Maya wiped away a tear before it could fall. That afternoon, Jack made 2 phone calls. The first was to Cliff, his old partner. "I'm building something new," he said, "and I want you in on it." Cliff was silent for a moment, then said, "Just tell me when and where." The second call was to a small medical research lab in Atlanta. "I want to fund a foundation," Jack told the director, "for spinal cord injury recovery for veterans and low-income patients. Name it after Maya's son." The director paused, then responded, "It would be our honor." When Jack told Maya about it that evening, she said nothing. She just put a hand on her chest and nodded, her eyes glistening. "You didn't have to do that," she began. "I had to," he interrupted. Because healing isn't just for one person. You gave me my life back. Now I'm giving it away. That night, as the lights of the mansion glowed like lanterns, Jack played the piano again. This time it was a melody, imperfect, hesitant, but real. Maya sat nearby, humming a song whose name he didn't know until now. He suddenly stopped. "What is that song?" "It's called Hush, Little Warrior," she said. "My mother sang it to me. I sang it to Caleb." Jack closed his eyes and played it again, and for the first time in years he felt like a man who was not only standing but moving forward with purpose, with grace alive awake and ready to step into the world again. A week had passed since Jack's walk to the pond, a pilgrimage that marked not just a physical recovery, but a soul reclaimed. The mansion had a rhythm again. The soft clatter of cutlery in the morning, the hum from the piano room, and the occasional burst of laughter between Jack and Maya as they debated everything from jazz to justice. But healing is never a straight line. It moves forward, pauses, takes 2 steps back, and then leaps forward unexpectedly. And on one warm Friday morning, as the estate woke under a pink southern sky, an uninvited piece of the past returned with the ring of the doorbell. Maya answered it. On the stone step stood a woman in a navy pantsuit and expensive heels. Her hair was silver blonde, her smile sharp. She didn't wait to be invited in. "I'm here to see Jack Remington," she said, stepping forward with the air of someone accustomed to doors opening for her. Maya politely blocked her path. "Who, may I say, is calling?" The woman paused. "Tell him it's Veronica." Maya's heart sank. She knew the name Veronica Pierce, Jack's ex-wife, who had left when his world collapsed. A moment later, Jack appeared in the hallway, leaning on his cane in a dark sweater and slacks. He stopped. "Veronica," he said, his voice level. "Jack," she replied. "You look different." "Most people do, and they can stand again." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "May I come in?" Jack nodded, gesturing toward the living room. Maya watched her glide past her perfume, a lingering intention. Inside, the silence was thick. Veronica sat on the edge of a velvet chair, and Jack settled into his familiar spot, his eyes guarded. "I didn't come to create drama," she began. "Then what did you come for?" "I read about the foundation, about the trust, about your resurrection." Jack's eyes darkened. "It wasn't a resurrection. It was a second life. And you're giving it away. Millions, Jack, to people you don't even know." "To people who need it," he said evenly. "To people like Maya." Veronica glanced toward the door. "Your nurse. She's the reason I'm standing." A pause. "Jack, I didn't come to argue," she said, her voice softer now. "I came to say I'm glad you're better, and I was wondering if there was a place for me in this new chapter of yours." Jack leaned forward. "You left when I needed you most." "I was scared," she snapped, as if releasing a long-held confession. "They told me you'd never recover, that you might lose your mind along with your body. I panicked. I was grieving the man I thought I had lost." "You didn't lose me," Jack said, his voice calm. "You let me go." Veronica's eyes welled up, but she blinked away the tears. "You're right. I failed, but I never stopped caring." Jack looked at her, truly looked, at the fine lines around her eyes, at the longing in her gaze, not for money, but for a sense of belonging. "I believe you," he said softly. "But that doesn't mean we can go back." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe we can go forward as something else." In the other room, Maya quietly moved down the hall, giving them privacy. She wasn't exactly jealous, but her chest felt tight. That afternoon, Jack found Maya in the garden. She was trimming the roses, her gloved hands gentle and precise. "Did you want to ask me something?" he said. She looked up. "No, not unless you want to tell me." She came to see if there was a place for her in my new life. "And is there—" Jack sighed. "I don't know, maybe. But I also know that what I'm building with you is real, and I won't let anything disrupt that." Maya nodded, her eyes on the roses. "Healing comes in many forms, Jack. Some come with a second chance, some with letting go." Jack gently took the clippers from her hand. "And for you, what does healing look like for you now?" Maya took a deep breath. "It looks like purpose. Like watching someone rise when they were sure they couldn't. Like Caleb's name meaning something in this world." Jack's eyes softened. "I want you on the foundations board as a partner." Maya blinked. "Jack, I'm serious. You're not just a part of my story. You rewrote it." She was silent for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll build it the right way. That evening, Jack returned to the living room where Veronica waited with her untouched glass of wine. I can't give you what you want, he said gently. I didn't think so, she replied. But I'm not angry anymore. Veronica let out a breath. Thank you. I hope you find your second life, he said, walking her to the door. Outside, twilight was falling. Fireflies danced across the lawn. Veronica turned back once, looked at him, and smiled. You really have changed. Jack smiled. No, I remembered who I was. As the door closed, Maya stood at the foot of the stairs watching. Jack walked toward her, steady and confident now. We have a foundation to launch, he said. And a story to tell, she replied. Together they walked into the evening. He was no longer the broken man. She was no longer just a caregiver. They were now partners in purpose and in healing, walking side by side into the next chapter. The next morning was crystal clear, as if the world had paused overnight to consider what true strength looked like. The mansion was alive. Light poured through the tall windows, painting golden patterns on rooms that had once been dusty and silent. Jack Remington and Maya Williams went about their new routine. He was no longer the patient. She was no longer just the caregiver. During breakfast, the phone rang. Jack answered, and his expression shifted from curious to stunned in an instant. He looked at Maya, his voice carrying a caution she hadn't heard before. It's the board chairman from the company. They're demanding a meeting today. Maya sat up straight, intrigued. The old board, the one that pushed you out. Jack nodded slowly. Yes, they're saying the foundation is hindering their projections. They want to negotiate. Maya understood. This wasn't just about politics. It was about power, reputation, control. Jack thought his old life was dead, but the world wasn't ready to let him go. He gave a wry smile. I'll handle it. By noon, Jack arrived at the sleek glass tower downtown, cane in hand. Maya followed, observing from the guest chairs. After everything they'd been through, this was his first return to the corporate battlefield, not as a tyrant, but as a wounded man who refused to stay down. The boardroom was austere, with a long mahogany table, cold chairs, and directors in sharp suits. The chairman, Catherine Hull, stood to greet him with a mix of stiff decorum and arrogance. Mr. Remington. He nodded. Ladies and gentlemen. Catherine sat abruptly. We've seen the initial financials for your foundation. Your withdrawal from daily operations combined with a significant allocation to projects outside our control. It's a concern. So you're concerned I'm too honest, Jack said softly. Concerned that I'm putting integrity over profit. A murmur rippled through the room. Catherine folded her hands. Integrity doesn't pay dividends. Jack leaned forward, his cane tapping lightly. It pays dividends in lives. Catherine's eyes flicked to the chart on the screen. Data points about veterans getting therapy community centers being funded, low-income children receiving scholarships. Your foundation, while its numbers are admirable, is siphoning off R&D money. Investors are threatening to pull out. Then they don't believe in tomorrow, Jack responded. They believe in a quarterly gain. The room was silent. Catherine's lips thinned. What do you want? A partnership of two visions. I resign as chairman of the board. Maya Williams will take my seat. I want a fair transition of power and full autonomy for the foundation projects. A gasp. Catherine's hand shook on her water glass. A veteran investor cleared his throat. Unprecedented, unthinkable, another one whispered. Jack spoke calmly. I demand accountability. You demand innovation. I demand evolution. Silence again. Then an investor stood. We need time, Jack nodded. 1 week. After that, control belongs entirely to the foundation. With that, he stood up, cane tapping back straight. The directors exchanged glances, some with reluctant respect, others with indignation. No one stopped him. In the lobby, Maya met him. She lightly touched his arm. That was incredibly brave. He let out a slow breath. I was honest. She smiled, and a wave of relief washed over her. Two realities had collided, a board of tycoons and a foundation built on compassion. That evening at the mansion, Jack and Maya walked in the garden. Fireflies winked like small stars around the pond. Jack stopped watching the dancing lights, his voice low. They resisted because they've never had to face their own humanity. Maya stood beside him, a still solid presence. But you have. Jack turned to her, his eyes deep. "You made me face it." She reached out gently, touching his hand. "And now we face the world with or without them." In the following days, Jack prepared for the Foundation's launch event. Maya helped him choose speakers, veterans, struggling families, and social activists. They practiced the speech she would present alongside him. Her confidence was unwavering. His presence was calm. They were no longer two separate people, but a team, a unified front. On the day of the launch, the grand ballroom was packed with journalists, community leaders, and people who were survivors of their own battles. The theme was healing from the inside out, from broken to purpose. Jack took the stage first. He spoke with fierce conviction, without flowery language or billion-dollar boasts. He spoke about redemption, about regret. The moment clay in his hands came alive. He introduced Maya, his partner, the equal heartbeat behind the vision. When she stepped up, the room fell silent. She spoke of loss of Caleb, of the lack of basic necessities for low-income families. She told stories of mothers choosing between medicine and food. She spoke of hope not as a naive optimism, but as a stubborn belief in small acts. The audience listened, captivated. Afterward, well-wishers lined up to shake their hands. A former addict hugged them, his eyes full of tears. A veteran thanked him for providing accessible mental health therapy. A single mother said she could now send her son to college because of a scholarship. Jack watched it all, humility etched on his face. He squeezed Maya's hand. "Today," he said softly, "we changed something." She nodded. "Not just for others, but for ourselves." At the back of the hall, Catherine Hall and several board members who had not attended watched in silence. A nervous PR rep approached them. Catherine showed annoyance, but said nothing. The message was clear. The influence was changing, power was shifting. Later, as night fell, Jack wheeled himself into the music room. Maya followed. He sat at the piano and played. The notes were deeper, steadier, richer. This time, the melody was no longer hesitant. It was vibrant and resilient. Maya listened, hiding her tears behind her hands. When he finished, he closed the lid and looked at her. "This is just the beginning," he said. She smiled. "Then let's begin." As they walked into the soft light of the lamps, Jack Remington realized that the road ahead wasn't smooth. It was unpredictable. But for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone. Jack woke before dawn. But this morning, the air was heavier. The dust from the Foundation launch had settled, replaced by the weight of expectations from supporters, critics, and investors. He sat by the window watching the low fog over the pond. Beneath the fog, doubts swirled. Maya walked in quietly, carrying freshly brewed coffee. She sat beside him. "How are you?" she asked softly. "Feeling the pressure," Jack admitted, rubbing his forehead. "I thought I'd feel free after today. Instead, I feel exposed." Maya nodded, handing him the coffee. "That's normal. When you're truly alive, you feel more vulnerable." Jack took a sip, bitter with adrenaline. Just then, the phone rang. It was Cortez, his legal counsel. "They're circling," Cortez called, saying the shareholders were ready to push for an early dissolution. Maya's face hardened. "That's a threat." "That's everything he built," Jack said softly. "A legacy." Maya put a hand on his. "A legacy evolves. It doesn't disappear just because someone feels threatened." He closed his eyes. Shame and anger flashed a residue of the man he was and the man he had become. But before the dawn, he had learned vulnerability, and that made him stronger than any power suit. Continuing from the previous section, the background music becomes more dramatic and urgent. The day moved with a frantic urgency. A board meeting was scheduled where the elder directors tried again to seize control. Jack was adamant about bringing Maya with him. In the boardroom, the air was cold. The suits had their words carefully prepared. Catherine tried to be polite. "Jack, can we revisit the agreement?" Jack nodded. "After you show me the community feedback." An assistant handed him a thick folder. Inside were hundreds of letter stories, photos, veterans in wheelchairs expressing their gratitude, mothers holding their children's diplomas, lives being transformed. He pushed the folder toward the board. "That is success measured in real value." The investors exchanged glances. Catherine's face was strained. "These are just anecdotes. We work with numbers." Jack asked, "What is worth more, $1,000 Or 1,000 lives healed? Catherine stood up abruptly. We will continue this discussion privately. Jack nodded. The meeting ended without resolution, but as they left, assistants brought fresh-baked muffins and coffee for the directors. They stopped, accepted them, a silent acknowledgement that service had meaning. Outside the building, Maya linked her arm with Jack's. You made them uncomfortable. He gave a small smile. I made them remember. On the way home, Jack turned on the radio, a news segment about ethical capitalism. His transformation was now news. Social media was abuzz. Some called it a miracle, others called it naive. But people were talking. Maya leaned in. Good. Dialogue is the first step. That evening, Jack invited Maya to the music room. He lifted the piano lid, his fingers on the keys. Maya sat beside him. It's so quiet. He took a deep breath, then began to play slowly, a pensive, steady melody. The notes echoed on the walls, lined with photos of happier days. When the piece ended, Jack looked up. I don't think they're going to give up easily. Maya looked him in the eyes. Then we don't let it fade quietly. He nodded. We fight for purpose. In the silence that followed, they discussed strategy, press releases, community outreach, transparency, a plan to solidify the foundation's independence and purpose. That night, Jack wrote a letter to the board by hand, declaring his full resignation from corporate management, transferring all control to the Maya Williams Community Foundation, and relinquishing any personal financial gain tied to the company's profits. He left the letter on the dining table. The next morning, he sent it out. A week later, the board's response came, a firm no. The proposal would be denied, but the newspapers had already published the letter. The public had read it. Maya stood with Jack as they watched the news. Veterans were on live television thanking them. Families sent in donations unsolicited. A local newspaper documented Maya's unpaid hours, framing them as systemic change. Jack turned to her. You did that? We did, she replied. He took her hand. I owe you. You don't owe me, she said. You just needed a reminder. In the middle of the night, Jack went to the glass room alone for stillness. He looked at the pond now swirling under the moonlight. The reflection was shattered just like the world he had walked into. But inside him, the fire still burned. Not of fear, not of anger, but of purpose. On an impulse, he pressed a button. The piano lid slowly opened, and he pressed one key, a single note. The sound wasn't perfect, not brilliant, but it broke the stillness. He returned to bed, his breath even. Maya placed a glass of water on his bedside table as he drifted to sleep. Tomorrow, another fight. Another step, but tonight he rested, guided by the melody of truth and faith, with the woman who had helped him find both. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Foundation's new headquarters, illuminating banners that read, Healing Beyond Medicine. It had been 3 months since the launch, and Jack Remington stood before his team, Maya beside him, confident and calm. Reports were stacked on the tables, budgets, grant proposals, community feedback. Everything was moving, growing, but the air was still tense. Jack cleared his throat. We've been independent for 90 days. The board is still fighting. They might sue. The press is divided. He let the silence hang. Donations are pouring in, but so are the expectations, he said. So today's about transparency. He handed Maya an audited financial document to make public. No hiding. Maya stepped up. No hidden fees, no corporate influence, every dollar accounted for, every recipient named. She held the document as if it were a truth. The team nodded. It wasn't a tactic. It was a statement. They wouldn't fight the board's way. They would fight with the truth. They were committed to integrity. Now they had to live it. That afternoon, Jack scheduled an interview with Ana Torres, a respected investigative journalist. In the plush downtown newsroom, office cameras and recorders were ready. She opened with a pointed question. Mr. Remington, many say your transition from CEO to philanthropist was too sudden. What really changed? Jack took a breath. I lost everything that anchored me, my company, my body, my identity. But I was given a second chance by someone who had nothing to gain but gave anyway. He glanced at Maya through the glass partition. That's where the change began. His words were soft but sharp, laced with fierce conviction. Anna continued. What about your board of directors? They say you're undermining investor confidence. Jack leaned forward. I say move toward a confidence rooted in compassion. Money without integrity is bankrupt. He paused. You can measure ROI in dollars, but it says nothing about lives saved, hope restored, dignity remembered. She let the silence hang, then closed her notebook with respect. Thank you, she whispered. That evening, after Maya had left the newsroom, Jack sat alone reviewing the stories and photos, veterans hugging loved ones, children with scholarship letters, families rebuilding after forgotten crises. He felt a mix of pride and fear the world had seen his new dream. Now they were watching to see if it would live. Back at the Remington estate, Maya found Jack by the piano. He played a soft chord, a sound that echoed uncertainty, but also resolve. She sat beside him, listening. Do you regret leaving the board? Maya asked. Jack stopped. I only regret the old me that I had to cut away, but I don't regret the man I've become. He resumed playing the notes richer now. A week later, the Foundation's annual gala took place. The ballroom glowed with soft light. The guests were a mix of community leaders, beneficiaries, philanthropists, and even the press. Jack greeted them with quiet strength. Maya stood as co-chair, confident but approachable. They launched their campaign's therapy scholarships for veterans' mobile clinics for underserved areas. When Jack spoke, he offered truth and testimony, what medicine couldn't fix. He introduced Maya, told her story, called her the soul of the project. The audience erupted in genuine, profound applause. In the back corner, a reporter from a rival newspaper scribbled furiously. A board member from Jack's old company watched in silent observance. The stage had shifted. The influence was changing hands. Afterward, people lined up for photos, handshakes, and praise. A tearful veteran called Jack aside. He knelt, listening to a story of missed treatments, mounting medical debt, and the shame of helplessness. Jack nodded silently, sharing empathy. Maya offered a business card, a free consultation, a chance to volunteer. A mother approached, trembling. Your organization saved my son. Maya hugged her. No words were needed. Afterward, Jack and Maya walked out onto the patio. The warm air carried the scent of jasmine. They watched the guests mill about the courtyard. Maya rested her head on Jack's shoulder. You did something truly meaningful tonight. He kissed her on the temple. Because you reminded me why. She looked out at the horizon. They'll keep trying to challenge us. He nodded. Let them. The truth always holds up under pressure. Inside, news of the gala was everywhere, live streams, posts, headlines like, From Wall Street to the Streets of Healing. Maya Williams' care beyond the charts. Some criticized, others praised, but everyone was talking. In the days that followed, Jack received letters, thank yous, stories, poems, essays. One from a wounded veteran simply read, You taught me how to stand. At night, Jack placed the letters on his bedside table. He had demanded transparency. The world responded with purpose and accountability. Maya caressed the engraving on his foundation ring. Promise me we'll always be honest. Jack smiled. I promise. That night he played the piano again, this time the full version of Hush, Little Warrior. Maya hummed softly beside him. The sound was like healing. In the soft light and music, Jack Remington, once destroyed by power and an accident, realized he was building something stronger than himself, more resilient than pain, a legacy not of fame, but of faith. Jack woke earlier than usual. A dull ache in his leg reminded him of his old fragility and his new strength. Today marked 6 months since Maya Williams had entered his life, half a year since that first spark of change. He walked silently to his study, stopping before the mirror. His reflection was tired, hopeful, scarred but steadier. Downstairs, Maya was setting out fruit and yogurt. Cinnamon-dusted almonds, fresh grapefruit, warm whole wheat toast. The aroma was a ritual now. Morning, Jack said softly. Morning. Maya replied, her voice bright but calm. Ready, Jack nodded. Let's do this. They walked together into his study where legal documents were waiting. Jack had arranged a mediation meeting with the former board members who had pushed him out completely. Catherine Hull, the chairman of the board, and several other executives would be attending. Maya watched as Jack stood at the head of the polished conference table. He placed his cane discreetly nearby. This time, he would stand. Catherine began with polite reservations. Jack, we see the public interest, but we remain concerned about financial responsibility. Her words were smooth as glass. Jack leaned forward. Here's the truth. He handed her a report transparent and full of impact stories. This foundation isn't an apology. It's a vision of empowerment. When Catherine tried to counter with numbers and charts, Jack responded with testimony survivors' scholarship recipients, veterans who could now walk or find jobs. He spoke with a quiet intensity. Every sentence was based on a risk that had been taken and carried. Catherine cut him off. You're asking us for forgiveness and to give up stakes you've held for 2 decades. Jack's voice was steady. I'm asking you to recognize that healing and growth aren't line items on a balance sheet. They're restored lives. The room was silent. Then a young executive spoke up. I lost my brother in Afghanistan. He never walked again, but your clinic helped his wife. She found purpose helping others. Heads turned. Catherine let out a breath through pursed lips. Jack nodded. Redemption isn't in an argument. It's in making amends. After hours of negotiation, they reached an agreement. Jack would officially resign from all corporate roles in 30 days. Maya Williams would take full control of the foundation's mission funds and vision. The corporate entity would contribute a one-time endowment, but would no longer have any influence over operations. Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Maya. He didn't waver. He didn't crumble. He nodded, his eyes welling up. After everyone left, Maya helped him move through the empty hallway. No applause, no headlines, just 2 people grounded in truth. That evening, Jack returned to the piano room alone. The house was quiet. The mansion's lights were dim. Memories fluttered like butterflies through the corridors of his mistakes, failures, and lost time. He sat down and opened the lid. The ivory keys gleamed. He didn't play the warrior's lullaby, but an improvisation disjointed at first, then cohesive, then full of hope. He let the melody unfold without expectation. It spoke of forgiveness, loss, and courage. Maya stood in the doorway. That was beautiful. He looked up, his heart pounding. It's all I have right now. It's enough, she said. He closed the lid and walked with her into the foyer. The portraits of ancestors looked down. He paused before a dusty silver frame of a younger Jack, the corporate chairman. The smile was proud, but hollow. He took a slow breath. I spent so many years chasing a ghost. Maya took his hand. Now you're building something real. Jack let that sink in. It carried the weight of every breath. A few days later, the foundation moved to its new clinic in Midtown Atlanta. The opening was intimate, with families, staff advisors, and local church leaders. Jack and Maya unveiled the first mobile unit, a refurbished van with therapy supplies staffed by volunteers and funded by local businesses. There were tears as a veteran leaned on a walker, taking one shaky step, then another. As a child, drew a self-portrait, no longer needing a wheelchair, as Maya hugged every mother who submitted a grant application, not a paper. After the ceremony, Jack and Maya stood outside as the sun set. I never thought I'd see this, Jack breathed. Not after I'd hit rock bottom. She smiled. Healing isn't linear, Jack. It's messy. And then it becomes alive. He turned to her. You taught me that. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. You learned it. They stood on the clinic's threshold, the lights glowing behind them, a beacon in the neighborhood. A young volunteer boy approached, timid. Mr. and Mrs. Remington. Thank you. Jack smiled. Just keep walking. The boy beamed and ran off. Jack felt tears in his eyes. Pride, humility, the same pride. That evening at the mansion, Jack called Cliff, his old partner. Cliff, he said, his voice light. We did it just as we planned. Cliff was surprised. You really did. I couldn't have done it without Maya. Silence on the line. Then Cliff responded. You owe her more than you think. Not a debt, a grace. Cliff hesitated. If you ever want to rebuild together, I'm listening. Jack considered it. He looked at a painting on the wall, old prototypes of inventions, patents holding, then looked at Maya's hands intertwined. Maybe next time, not for holdings, but for something that holds. He hung up. Something shifted. Later, Jack held the bronze bell Maya had brought in Chapter 3. He held it in his palm. Ding, he said softly, ringing it once. Maya smiled. Still keeps time. He placed it on the music room shelf next to the piano. Then he unveiled something new, a glass cabinet filled with letters. Thank you, letters. I can walk again because of you. I got my degree. You saw me. They called it the Remington Archive. Not an achievement, but a story. A monument to humanity. Jack stood with Maya. In the quiet lit room, the walls no longer held medallions or illusions. They held faces, names, lives. Jack turned to Maya, his eyes sparkling. We didn't just heal bodies, we healed stories. Maya nodded. And the stories healed us all. They walked into the silence, broken only by the faint memory of hope echoing through piano keys, glass jars, and willing hearts. The journey was far from over, but for the first time they walked it together, not to escape the past, but to redeem what lay ahead. One trusting step at a time. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the reflecting pond. Jack Remington sat on the patio, his cane leaning against the railing, his hand clutching the river stone Maya had given him months ago. He looked at its smooth surface, feeling the weight of every decision that had led him here. The humiliation, the ridicule in the restaurant, the fall from the horse, the betrayal of the board, and the redemption born from the hands of a woman he'd barely known when it all began. A soft footstep beside him. Maya carrying a tray of coffee and fresh strawberry scones. She set the tray down without a word and sat. Neither spoke. The morning was full enough. Jack took a sip of his coffee. 6 months, he said softly, since you walked into my life. Maya gave a small smile. And 6 months since you were brave enough to let yourself rise. He placed the stone in her hand. This belongs to you. She looked down at it, then met his eyes. No, she whispered. It belongs to us both. It held Caleb and now it holds this. Jack nodded, swallowing something heavier than gratitude. Then let it remind us to keep standing even when we can't feel our feet. In the music room, sunlight danced on the letters preserved in glass jars. Each letter was a breath, a life changed. A veteran's whispered thanks. A single mother's scholarship check. A young girl's self-portrait no longer limited by a wheelchair. Jack and Maya stood amidst the letters and the piano, silent companions in purpose. Outside, laughter echoed across the grounds as volunteers prepared a community meal. Jack ran his hand over the piano keys, stopping at one note. Play, Maya urged. He tapped a chord and then another. A melody emerged stronger, steadier, woven from challenge and faith. Maya hummed softly along. The song wasn't just theirs. It belonged to every life touched, every hope kindled, everyone who had dared to fall before they learned to walk again. Later, staff and volunteers gathered for lunch at long tables under the oak trees. Veterans and caregivers, students and activists all pulled up chairs. Jack spoke softly to the crowd. We didn't build this foundation to earn applause. We built it so people could rise without permission. Dignity isn't earned, it's remembered. A veteran raised his glass too, rising together. He repeated the toast. This wasn't power. This was presence. Afterward, Jack excused himself and found Maya among the crowd, handing out bottled water to the community. He came up behind her quietly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You built something that outlasted me, he said. She turned, looking into his eyes. And you gave me the space to believe it. They lingered in the moment. Two souls who hadn't sought salvation but found it in 1,000 gentle acts of rising. That evening, the mansion was quiet. The lights in the house were on. The pond sparkled under the lamps. Jack went to the glass room by himself and stopped looking out. From behind, Maya entered with a blanket. She draped it over his legs and sat on the floor beside him. Jack gently turned and kissed the top of her head. Thank you, he said. For what? For making me feel like a man again. That's not healing, she replied. That's recognizing what was always there. He placed his hand on hers. The river stone lay on the side table, a silent witness, not a relic of loss, but a symbol of presence. They sat in silence, not empty, but full of breath-light and a humble completeness. Jack's reflection wavered on the pond, but inside, he felt whole. In the quiet air, he asked, Do you think our story ends here? Maya let out a breath. It doesn't end. It continues, in every life we touch. Jack smiled. He reached for his cane, standing slowly, steadily, not because she helped him, but because of all she had helped him reclaim. Maya watched him rise once more, stronger and surer. Jack turned. "Let's walk." They walked into the light of the patio. Not blindly, not defiantly, but with a quiet resilience side by side. Because true healing isn't about walking alone. It's about rising together every time the world tries to knock you down. They had learned that lesson through a song, through pain, through gratitude, and through their shared stillness. They stood not at an end, but at a beginning, where a broken pair of legs could inspire a foundation, where compassion could become a legacy, and where dignity could rise again, not in victory, but in faith. They walked one trusting step at a time. This is the end of the story, a reminder of the power of connection, resilience, and compassion. Jack and Maya found each other at a turning point in their lives, and together they created a new chapter not just for themselves, but for the entire community. Their story continues not on the page, but in every life they have touched.